Okay, thank you, Tyler. Thanks, Azurian.
Yes, again, thank you.
It's loading a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So, yes, my name is Andrew Creighton. I'm a PhD student at the University of Tartu. And today I'll be talking about Implosion, Umwelt, and formal rationalization. I'll start discussing the structure of the presentation. And so basically, I will demonstrate how implosion in formal rationalized systems influence biological entities and their abilities to incorporate and interact with the world. And I will argue that formal rationalization transforms biological, social, and cultural structures and processes to facilitate these systems. So the structure of this presentation will begin with some key concepts, the first being implosion. Then I will focus on formalization from two theoretical perspectives, McDonaldization and Postemotionalism. I will then use these concepts to discuss implosion and rationalized technologies. And I hope this demonstrate here how McDonaldized and the post-emotional systems facilitate each other through implosions of technology, social groups, and emotional structures, which are consequently rationalized by these systems. I will then give a similar discussion regarding emotions and emotional perception. In the last two sections, I will define the concept of Umwelt and further this discussion of implosion and formal rationalization into physical interactions with the world and physiological and corporeal changes for complete. Okay, so my understanding of implosion comes from George Ritzer's Enchanting a Disenchanted World, where a drawing from Max Weber, Jean Baudrillard, Debord, and Karl Marx, Ritzer demonstrates how formal rationalized systems are justified through enchantment. And enchantment can be understood in a variety of as a variety of phenomena, ranging from superficial humanism, social relations, to concepts like magic, or even things like a sense of wonder. Ritzer argues that such enchantment is used to present formal rationalized consumption and labor as wondrous, in a sense, amazing things. And this tends also to be strongly related to social groups and personal identity. So implosion itself can be related to this enchantment. However, its differentiation from enchantment in rationalized processes themselves is relatively difficult to create, and it's perhaps why it has become increasingly prevalent part of our societies. The concept of implosion itself comes from Jean Baudrillard, and he relates it to the creation of mass information that ultimately removes the meaningfulness of all information from this, in a sense, emotional overload or informational overload. And Ritzer pulls heavily from this definition, but simplifies it to an extent. So here, implosion can be understood as an erosion of borders between meaning, creating a singular meaning or mixed meanings or different meanings entirely. So this really hints at the major difference between Ritzer and Baudrillard's ontology, where Baudrillard views rationalization in a sense as a chaotic and uncontrollable, while Ritzer argues they are somehow in between, that while they are often created by, if I may use an old term, the para elite, they often create unintended consequences. And in some cases, formal rationalized systems are not compatible with other formalized systems. Yes, so regarding formal rationalization, the first perspective I'll be talking about is McDonaldization. Again, this comes from work of George Ritzer, and has been one of the most prevalent sociological theories of the past 3 decades. It is brought to its fullest in Ritzer's most recent edition of the McDonaldization of society, which is 9th edition. The concept is relatively simple, and Ritzer argues, pulling heavy from Max Weber, that rationalization is a technique, rationale, a way of organization that aims to achieve, sorry, I missed my spot, is that aims to achieve goals or aims while under strict and rigid regulations. So McDonaldized systems are characterized by 5 elements. First being a calculability or the quantifiability of a system and its products. Secondly, is control of actors, processes within the system. Thirdly, its efficiency in operations. And fourthly, its predictability in operations. The 5th element, non-human technologies, is in a sense any form of technology that controls humans and is generally defined in opposition to human-controlled technology, which is technology that, of course, humans control. It is sometimes omitted from characterizing a rationalized system. And this is because technology here does not just mean material innovations and inventions like cell phone, but can be organizational structures, laws, and so on. So non-human technologies could argue to be control itself, or even just similarly for form rationalization. However, this depends on the system we are looking at, and non-human technologies may in some instances be McDonaldized systems itself, or it may be some form of technology that has been incorporated within the system to assist and create control, calculability, and so on. And perhaps Facebook can be a good instance or example of this, as form rationalized. The system itself can be seen as a form rationalized system that also makes use of non-human technologies through its algorithms that create and prioritizes, curates and prioritizes certain types of information over others. So Ritzer argues that McDonaldized systems are increasingly prevalent globally, and more and more institutions and social systems are being structured in this way. And he argues this is because such systems allow for the most effective means of production, consumption, and communication. However, Ritzer argues this comes at a heavy cost, largely the disenchantment and dehumanization of the world, ecological and environmental damage, increasing displacement of skilled labor, and the rigidness of these systems often end up compromising their own effectiveness. And Weber terms this cost as rationalities, and Ritzer makes use of these terms very much in the same way. So, second form of formal rationalization I'll be talking about is postemotionalism. And this maybe will be long, I'm sorry. So yes, while McDonaldization tends to focus on technology, labor, organizations, and means of consumption, postemotionalism tends to focus on more social organizing, social organization, development, and the cultural aspects, specifically being emotions. This term postemotionalism originates with Stjepan G. Meštrović's edited volume, Genocide After Emotion. And it's used more specifically in this book within the context of sociology, of the sociology of genocide and war crimes. However, Meštrović's Postemotional Society here, published in 1997, is the first text and perhaps the fullest conceptualization of postemotionalism as a concept aligning to more general sociology. So Meštrović's main argument is that many societies globally are being emotionally manipulated by the cultural industry, though he focuses specifically on American society in his book, but draws examples from United Kingdom, Canada, Netherlands. And this concept of cultural industry, he borrows quite heavily from Adorno and Horkheimer. However, the basis of this manipulation stems from the fracturing of collective effervescence or societal emotions and rituals, and the fracturing of the collective consciousness, she terms as societal myths and authority. So Meštrović argues this fracturing stems from the introduction of formal rationalization into social systems and the subsequent division of labor and disenchantment. This creates a decentering of social institutions like the church, the monarchy, and so on, which creates an economic actor. The increasing prevalence of consumerism in the post-war era furthers this modernization process by creating a consumer society, which further fractures the collective effervescence and consciousness through dissolving of social clubs and centering consumption and television and radio media as the main forms of societal ritual and myth entertainment. This creates what David Riesman calls an other directed type, or you can understand it perhaps as an ultra-anomic character in which, or actor, in which advertisers and marketers are able to instill a sense of accomplishment, fulfillment, and social inclusion being only attainable through conspicuous consumption. So, such strong social relations between individuals become strained because of this process, and the individuals begin more and more looking towards consumption as opposed to traditional institutions and families as a means of social enfranchisement. Consequently, tolerance, jealousy, relative deprivation, which could perhaps be understood as keeping up with the Joneses, come to categorize social interaction more and more. However, post-emotional society, according to Meštrović, developed within the 1960s with two major tragedies, the JFK assassination and the American Civil War. The televising of these events presented an implosion of time and space, where viewers were able to watch the Vietnam War occur almost instantaneously. And in many journalistic reports, soldiers would often be interviewed, and then it would be reported the same soldier was killed a few hours later while in combat. Moreover, war crimes and atrocities from both the American and the Vietnamese side were also reported on. And this presented the USA as violating death rights. Soldiers were not seen as dying in an abstract, normal, noble death, but were humanized and then killed in a confusing, chaotic setting. And reporting on war atrocities also challenged American authority on moral and ethical grounds. And this fractured the collective conscious and effervescence substantially, as the horrors of war greatly violated the death rituals and moral holdings of many Americans, while the mass and continuous violence disrupted collective myths of American exceptionalism and authority. And so this is Vietnam War, but you can see a similar process regarding the JFK assassination, which again presents a similar picture. The president's death presented American policing and military as failable and incompetent, while the televising of his death again violated the ritual death rights. These events, in a sense, created a collective trauma that the American governance was unable to deal with, and consequently balkanized the country into group-centered effervescences and collective consciousnesses, leaving many feeling that national institutions were incompetent, inhumane, and consequently they felt vulnerable, disconnected from wider society, and uncertain of the future, which again could perhaps just be described by the concept of anomy. So according to Meštrović, the cultural industry is able to incorporate this ever-increasing anomy and other directedness into marketing schemes, playing off of the need for community, social inclusion, and emotional validation by offering products that supposedly would give or help attain these needs, or help as well as by manipulating and changing emotional perceptions. Yes, forgive me. So yes, it creates these desire for needs, but also manipulates changing emotional perceptions by nullifying and misdirecting them. And I will discuss this perhaps, I will a little bit later. So these nullified emotions can be dead emotions brought out from past and recontextualized in the present through historical narratives, a strong action causing emotions directed at the mundane. The results are a fracturing of, and a balkanization of social groups, and this also continued fracturing of the collective effervescence and consciousness, and the compounding of the other directed type into a post-emotional actor, which again allows for formalization to increasingly occupy emotional space. So I have this chart here, and I put it here perhaps to try and make what I just said a little clearer. And you can see both perspectives have a sense of pros and cons, where McDonaldization allows for increased production by reliability, and also in many institutions such as legal institutions, many corporations and companies, this constructs the basis of their existence and operations. But however, as I already discussed, this tends to cause irrational rationality, ecological destruction, rigid systems, waste, and disenchantment, dehumanization. And post-emotional characters, they tend actually to be more pleasant, less violent, more tolerant of others. And so you can see these societies tend to value minority rights to an extent more than the past manifestations. However, again, people within these societies tend to be emotionally confused. While they are tolerant, they are less accepting. They tend to be more social codependent, which tends to lead to superficial relationships. And this tends to create a certain desperation for the social interaction, which again creates a superficial and conflicting relationships. And this eventually results in unattainable desire for community and groups, but it is in a sense quite difficult for many people within these societies to obtain this. And regarding implosion, both McDonaldization and post-emotionalism discuss these concepts, concept of emotional nullification and emotional polarization. Both indicate forms of emotional, the meanings regarding emotions as being imploded, but also emotional post-emotionalism has this concept of balkanization of both society and emotions, and this tends to result in the opposite of borders being created between emotions and society. And yes, McDonaldization again tends to use implosion regarding technology, societal and economic structures, roles, identities, and activities. Okay, so regarding implosion and rationalized technology. When these views are applied to the implosion and rationalization of technology, it becomes apparent that McDonaldization facilitates post-emotionalism through creating technological structures and social situations that create anomy and alienation. And this anomy and alienation in turn creates a greater reliance on McDonaldized structures by further balkanizing social groups. For instance, the implosion, so yes, in my first example, I'll be discussing labor and consumption, and the implosion of labor and consumption in what has been termed prosuming, and the implosion of labor and leisure, which can be seen regarding concept of digital nomads, destabilizes labor markets, creating precarious employment. And this implosion regarding labor in many ways is very beneficial for corporations and companies, as it allows for, among many other things, cutting costs. It reduces the human factor in decision-making and operations. But for many involved, this creates, as I said, job insecurity, unpredictable futures, which in turn makes it harder to maintain relationships and community. And this tends to lead to anxiety and frustration, and a sense of desperation to gain and hold employment, which for many people will always be inherently unstable. So this creates a continuous anxiety regarding employment stability, and the difficulties this causes in maintaining relationships and community further compounds this anxiety, as this removes support and social connections that may aid an individual in better coping with job insecurity, effectively eliminating these emotional structures. But also these communities may also, in perhaps a better world, lead to more stabilized employment. So you can see there is an implosion of social relations as well. While community and social and relationships become insecure and precarious, and often are reliant on employment security, which is increasingly unlikely to be obtained. So in the second example, this is regarding Facebook. And Facebook allows for an implosion of group relations regarding family, friends, co-workers, and acquaintances. This is largely due to situating all these individuals from various groups within more or less a single virtual place. This at once creates a very McDonaldized platform. Communication is more calculable through Facebook algorithms, message logs, friends lists, and dates. This all exists within the borders and limitations of this website. Predictability can also be seen through, again, relative stability of the platform, allowing for easier messaging of individuals, which can be answered through computers or smartphone devices. So it is, in the sense of, again, an implosion of time and space, as communication can happen quite quickly. And again, this communication can also be done on a more one-on-one basis to even mass communication. However, this connectivity also implodes various primary, secondary, and role groups without online social media would generally present. Sorry, I'm mixed up a bit. Yes, so implosion implodes these social groups, and when without this platform, they would tend not to be within the same context together. And so this tends to create mainly an issue, as we tend to have different social groups that we tend to act differently with. So we tend to send different messages, information, and present ourselves differently depending on the social groups we are with. However, in this implosion, presenting yourself in relation to all of these relationships may create conflicting views of you among various members of the groups related to you, and perhaps even push some individuals away. However, maintaining an identity that appeases all of these social groups within your account may also leave you relatively isolated, as this may reduce the information expressions you are able to share. So this is perhaps why Facebook is not being utilized as often, as maintaining healthy communication with various individuals in your life requires differentiation between these groups and relationship privacy. However, maintaining an account for social events, private messaging is still very much important in today's context. And having said all of this, individuals who retain relatively unstable or few face-to-face relationships may rely on Facebook for the majority of their meaningful socialization. And so again, you can see this McDonaldization of communication which creates fast and convenient forms of socialization. And those who reliant on this socialization further facilitate the formalization of the system. So formalization is able to implode social groups, emotional structures, and technology, shaping them to facilitate rationalized systems. However, emotions, moral meanings, and emotional perceptions can be rationalized to fit these systems as well. The implosion of emotions through nullification and polarization, for instance, creates individuals that, regarding nullification, are relatively passive and do not perceive events as emotional, either through affective cues being socialized out of the emotional link with perception and object, or through tight social control. For instance, service industry employees might be a good example of this, as dealing with problematic customers may result in their firing if they are overly emotional. And so many of these workers tend to develop, which you can call a thick skin, or apathetic emotional responses to such customers. And the opposite may also happen when strong action causing emotions like rage, and this is regarding polarization of emotions, are socialized to be presented towards mundane incidences, which in turn removes a likelihood of emotional expressions directed at major issues and the consequential action. However, the vocalization of emotions is also prevalent here. And this can be seen regarding Ritzer's concept of finite provinces of meaning, which explains different cognitive states and perceptions we experience throughout everyday life. However, vocalization can be seen to make use of the provincialization of meaning by associating morals and emotions within these provinces. So for instance, while operating as, say, a banker, business owner, manager, a moral, or perhaps even in some instances, immoral decision-making is justified by the occupational role that the person is in. So this consequently removes justifications and affects cues for emotional responses. However, when out of this position, a similar decision for the same person may create an extreme emotional reaction, as decisions here are not justified by a role, and also tends to confine. And so, yes, this tends to confine extreme emotions to certain social fears and incidences like tragedy, primary relations, and institutions specialized in emotional labor. So the rationalization of emotions, morals, perceptions tend to nullify and redirect emotions through implosions or tokenization. So I will now try to discuss more on the physiological aspects of formal rationalized implosions. To help explain this, I will use Jakob von Uexküll's concept of Umwelt, and Umwelt designates the subjective world of an organism. And it does this through recognizing non-human animals as retaining interpretive abilities and actively interacting with the world. This interaction is done through perceptual organs, which recognize its environment, and through its operational organs, which allow for interaction and manipulation of the environment. All of which, working in tandem, is understood as the functional cycle. And Umwelt also entails an organism's wider environmental and social relations. So the next two slides, before I conclude, I will focus on how these aspects of Umwelt are utilized and transformed through implosions within formal rationalized systems. And this section will focus significantly less on humans, and I will focus more on non-human animals. Okay. So this is Siegfried and Roy's secret garden and dolphin habitat, which is a zoo and aquarium associated with the Las Vegas casino, the Mirage. And this zoo allows participants to swim with, feed, and create paintings with dolphins in the dolphin habitat of the establishment. And the presence of this zoo within the mirage, in a sense, can be seen as an implosion, as it mixes two normally separate establishments and businesses. This acts as a McDonaldized implosion, as it allows for the mixing of two forms of consumption, zoos and gambling, allowing for increased consumption by acting as a sort of double drop to consumers. This is especially important from a post-emotional perspective, as this allows for a sort of family vacation where consumers are able to experience more adult-oriented forms of entertainment while also allowing for experiences of younger family members. And this could be seen as a nullification of emotions, as it allows for different experiences suitable for varied audiences. In a sense, simultaneously, consequently removing affected cues, though also removing needs for compromise, emotional management and expressions, and etc. But so returning specifically to this dolphin habitat, formalization can be seen regarding interspecies subjectivity with the dolphin habitat and humans. Subjectivity, so yes, perhaps forgot to mention, I'll be discussing the implosion of intersubjectivity between non-human animals and humans and environment. So yes, intersubjectivity denotes shared understandings of reality and meaning according to Schutz, and this can arguably be seen with human-dolphin interactions at the dolphin habitat and similar establishments in other locations, as customers are able to interact with the dolphins through swimming with them, petting them, feeding them, creating paintings with them. And these are fundamental aspects for many people of emotional rituals. And for many guests, this could be seen in a sense, a creation of a relationship with the dolphins, and again, creating social emotions that are not only attached to the dolphins, but through proxy, they are also attached to the zoo as well as casino. And so again, you can see this implosion of institutions and the effectiveness that it creates. However, this intersubjectivity comes at a high price on the dolphin's end. As a biopsychologist, Lori Marino argues that dolphins are extremely social animals. They live in communities, raise their young for relatively long periods of time, and have intergenerational roles. Also, they are adapted to an ocean environment which has large amounts of stimuli. And Siegfried and Roy's dolphin habitat, however, cannot offer them any of this. So the dolphins are extremely isolated socially and have little environmental stimuli. However, they are able to recognize humans as being entities capable of some communication with them. So there is in fact some intersubjectivity between dolphins and humans here. However, removing dolphins from the social and environmental Umwelt leaves little for them to interact with, so the perceptual and operational organs are extremely understimulated and utilized. So when customers are brought to interact with them, this is really one of the only times they are capable or able to interact with the world and a wider range of individuals in a social setting. So this isolation of dolphins creates a desire for social environmental stimuli and interaction, and is a manipulation of dolphin Umwelt within the formalized system, and this facilitates this is facilitated and utilized to appease consumer desires for intersubjective interactions with exotic animals. However, offering enough stimuli in dolphin socialization to properly accommodate any of these dolphins would realistically be fairly impossible, but also extremely expensive, and would also reduce this desire within the dolphins to interact with humans. So this is not only an implosion of social relations between animals and non-humans, but also in a sense an implosion of dolphin suffering with emotions of intersubjectivity, as it uses this suffering through manipulating and imploding Umwelt to create a desire for intersubjectivity. And so So here I'll be talking about implosions of Umwelt from a more physiological and corporeal perspective. And so yes, how the transformation of Umwelts by formalized rationalized systems do not only occur within the manipulation of social environmental factors, but also takes place in more physiological meanings. This could be argued to occur among humans within the context of design of babies, which tends to bring up a number of ethical issues regarding genetic editing to gain certain physical traits and eugenics. However, genetic editing on humans is still in its infancy, and right now this is largely concerned with ethical debates. Moreover, current projects occupied with genetic editing tend to be focused on specifically removing genetic diseases. So there is not really, from what I have seen in the literature, any evidence of this more, in a sense, sci-fi editing of genes. However, changes to corporeality through breeding can be seen with reckless breeding of dogs and livestock. So I will first discuss about dogs. And of course, this is in a sense quite an extreme situation, but it can be seen quite prevalently. And so these dogs usually are purebred and usually, sorry, I'm a little bit flustered. So yes, this kind of notion of a purebred dog can arguably be first seen as a status symbol for nobility and the leisure class. However, with the advent of the consumer society, the larger middle class also gained access to them. And this created a further demand for certain breeds, which has led to some instances of inbreeding and associated health, genetic, and physical issues. However, when viewed from a post-emotional perspective, the transformation of dog Umwelts through breeding manipulation allows for more central control and efficiency, allowing them to act almost solely as objects of comfort or replacements of human sociality. And this can be especially seen regarding isolated elderly people. The small size of many of these dogs mitigates chances of biting and makes them more manageable on things like walks and within the house, and they tend not to eat as much food. However, joint issues with many of the dogs, as well as heat and breathing issues, means the abilities of operational organs are greatly transformed to a relatively sedentary lifestyle. Effectively, these dogs' Umwelts are transformed through implosions, created to rationalize breedings to be emotional support and companions that meet the needs of a emotional and consumerist setting. So in other words, this reckless breeding destroys natural Umwelts of these dogs by rationalizing the breeding process to produce dogs only. So they do not take into consideration health factors. And this in turn can be used to appease the emotional desires of companionship in post-emotional societies. So regarding livestock and this implosion of corporality for production, operational organs and corporality can be seen to have similar effects regarding control in regards to livestock. The example of the Cornish cross chicken, this bird has been bred in a sense to exemplify McDonaldized principles. The relative immobility of this species means that efficient, calculable, and predictable to manage and control, while their quicker maturation time and larger growth also aids in production, efficiency, predictability, and control. The physiological structures of these chickens have been transformed through breeding, so their operational organs, especially regarding movement, have been greatly reduced in maneuvering abilities and longevity, reducing their abilities to interact with the world. So in this sense, they have been transformed by a formal rationalized system to better serve the needs of said system, effectively imploding their corporeal structures to ones that facilitate formal rationalization and the need for leads to production. So, concluding, McDonaldized and post-emotional implosions within form rationalized systems transform technology, emotional structures, and social relationships, as well as emotions and emotional perceptions, and in some instances, cognitive states, as discussed with Alfred Schutz. It also implodes intersubjectivity through manipulation of the environment and emotions. And then, yes, it implodes popular structures as well. And all of this is done to better suit and to facilitate said rationalized systems. So yes, and rationalized systems are able to manipulate social and environmental aspects of Umwelt as well as structures. So thank you. I will exit out of it.
Stop sharing.
Stop sharing.
On top.
Okay.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, sorry.
There you go.
Sorry, it is hard to control.
Well, very good. So, thank you, Andrew. And well, now we have some time for questions and discussion. And there was already one question in the chat. So I will start from, with that one. And it was from Ludmila. And it was directed to Andrew. And the question was, do you think semiotics can help developing a new AI model closer to genuine human intelligence?
This is for you. I don't know.
It
It's
was
not necessarily
directed to me.
I specialized in AI, but
It was directed
as Marx said,
more towards me, but it's
human
good to know
behind
Andrew's
this
perspective.
algorithms. It is perhaps a question I cannot answer. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I can't really hear no one because there is some issue with the microphone, I think, or I don't know whether the problem is in my side.
Say that question again.
Should I try to answer? Yeah. The first part is of course the hard problem of consciousness, right? How you get from a physical part to qualia. So there's like so if you would go to the direction of that, can we actually create machine that is like human? Then of course you would step on that, and in the sense that it will get to the chicken and egg problem, of course, philosophically, right? And you will be creating a human, not an AI in the end, in a sense. But of course, what I see the bigger issue or something is that human like. So why would you creating it in a sense that human like AI is not better? Because what seems to be good about AI as this is my like not my AI is not my specific topic of research, but I'll just say as much as I know that what is good about AI is the part which makes it not human, the part that helps us to do specific tasks, etc. So yeah, so talking about how it could create AI that is human-like, then it is of course sci-fi, but short answer that yeah, like anything that helps us to understand humans would helps us towards that also. But of course, computational semiotics is like a big field that's developing, and I know closely to. I didn't talk anything from computational semiotics actually, so I cannot say much from this perspective. And but also the AI is progressing at a really fast speed, and like as I have understood, the changes and progresses are happening like in every, well, not year